Ooh, mermaid, rainbow, mermaids. Little Mermaid. Uh-huh. Hi there, and welcome to my channel. This is your host, Dancing Johari. And, well, today I have something pretty special for you. I'm going to customize my first new doll on the channel. It's a J3 doll. And, well, it's Clawdeen from Creepover, and here she is. Now, to make her into a mermaid, I kind of have to remove some things, but at the same time, she's a really well-made doll. She's really well-articulated, and I think she's going to make a cute rainbow version of the Little Mermaid. And since it's Pride Month, well, here's my inspiration: the Little Mermaid movie, and of course, rainbows. First things first, let's get her undressed and remove the ears, because, you know, I want to try to save those for later. And then off comes her hair. Then I put her in boiling water and followed Delightful's video for how to remove a G3 head. It takes a couple of tugs. First you have to take it off one bump, then over the other. Once her hair is all removed, I go ahead and use acetone to remove her factory paint. Now, here's the interesting part. I went to go remove her legs thinking I was going to need a Dremel, and wow, that just popped right off. Let's see if the other one comes off too. Yay! So if you need to remove a leg, it's actually much easier now. After that, I removed the joints with my Dremel, and, well, I drilled a hole in the back in line with her spine, and then widened it to take the coupler for the armature. Then using hot glue, I put the coupler in place, or the connector in place. And then I decided to try to modify these ears. I wanted her to have more of a human look, so her ears both have to be moved, and they need some modifications. That seems okay so far. Then taking two parts of epoxy sculpt in equal parts, I go ahead and mix it up and get the coupler permanently set into place. Then I also use some snakes of epoxy to modify the ears, and this is where I made a mistake, so be careful. I used too much epoxy. Then I connected the armature and allowed everything to finish curing. While it cured, I went ahead and started working on the fin. I traced up a pattern, cut it out of Easy Steam, used another pattern for the body that I already had made up, and, well, added a wire in between the two parts of the fabric for the fin, fluke, and used the wire to attach it to the doll. And then, of course, I trimmed the wire. So fishy. This performance fabric is actually better, I think, than cotton. Next, it's time to add the fluff, which is quilt batting, aka KP Creation style. I just basically take quilt batting I get at the craft store, cut it into strips, and wrap it around the doll until I've got the basic shape of what I'm going for. Now, since performing fabric is really thin, I don't have to worry about keeping it a little bit thinner than I want it to be, because the fabric stretches and it's really thin, and so it doesn't add really anything to the body structure. If I was using fur, it would be completely different. Next, I take pins and pin up both sides, and I pin down the fluke so it doesn't keep swiveling around. And then using the ladder stitch, I go ahead and begin sewing shut the first of the side seams. Now, for the ladder stitch, if you want pointers on how to do this correctly, I'd suggest watching Delightful's videos. I do okay with this now, but I don't think I can explain it very well. The ladder stitch is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically going back and forth and making little stitches that's through the fabric to make a clean seam, so that when you tug it, the stitches are completely hidden. It's a really cool stitch. I really think that it's a saving grace for these mermaid dolls, because otherwise I'm not sure how I'd hide the stitching, especially with fabric like this where I'm not airbrushing. If I was airbrushing, it wouldn't matter as much, I think, but I'd still like to have a nice clean seam. And well, if you're hearing crickets in the background, I do apologize. We recently got a bearded dragon, and he needs insects for protein, so the size of the crickets he eats tend to make noise. I have to figure out what I'm going to do about that. Once you get to the end on once you get both sides sewn up, I left the end open because as I close up the bottom of the side seams, I want to attach the fluke with a modified ladder stitch. Now what I do with this is basically I do it one side at a time so I can hopefully hide most of the stitches. So as I do like the ladder part on the part that's going to hide the stitches, which is the top of the flap that's going on over the fluke, and then I stab down into the fluke, pull it through, do a straight stitch back up, and then do a half ladder stitch. Kind of gives it a clean seam, but I did see some stitches on this particular doll until I hid them with some paint. Oops. Once it's all done, it's time to do the other side and close up the other side seam at the end. Now at the top, because the Little Mermaid has a little flap of fin at the top, I decided that I was going to add a fin. Instead of epoxy sculpt, I was going to add a little fin there. And then once it was gathered and sewn into place, I used some hot glue to secure it down. Then gathering up some more rectangles of that same fabric, I went ahead and added some fins to her sides and for dorsal fins as well. And I also used Easy Steam and 2 pieces of the same material to make 4 little ankle fins. Because I noticed the Little Mermaid really has like a lot of flowiness and it almost looks like an X-wing formation when she swims, so I wanted to honor that from the new film. Next, I took another stab at my ears. The epoxy sculpt just keeps popping off, so I went ahead and used some thermoplastic and made her some new ears, and I used a thermoplastic to cover up the holes in her head. I went ahead and painted the ears to match, and then painted the scalp to match the hair that I want to use to reroot. And taking ink black standard temperature nylon hair and the black mini braids, I went ahead and began the reroot, alternating between a few mini braids here and there, but mostly the straight ink black. I really like how these mini braids stick out. Gives me a little bit of Navi vibes, a little bit, but she had braids in the movie, so why not? And unfortunately, when I rerouted a little too close to this one cap, it popped off. I will have to fix that later. I went ahead and finished the reroot, and yep, I got a pretty good hole there. So I took some fresh thermal pellets that I got from Hobby Lobby, heated it up in water, which turns it transparent, and plugged up that hole. Once it was completely cooled down, it turns white again. So I'm going to go ahead and paint it to match the hair. That'll help hide it. There we go. I went ahead and took the two parts of the part and went ahead and used some elastics to separate that. And then I added my Galaxy glue and used a brush to swish it around to make sure that all the plugs were glued in place. Next, I wrapped up the bottom part of the doll using some pins and a towel. I used some Mr. Super Clear, and I began blushing the doll body. For this, I don't use the pastels. I was using eyeshadow, believe it or not. Just eyeshadow that wasn't too sparkly. I went ahead and masked off the hairline and did the same thing for the head. And I'm going to use a little bit of blushing to make this ears match just a titch more. I did try to give her more of a natural lip look, but it's just not showing up. So, ooh, I like this. You know what? Let's give her red lips. Why not? That looks really good, and I really like the color on this with this skin tone. Now taking my warm watercolor pencils, I went ahead and began tracing or planning her face. I began deciding where her eyes were going to be, marking off the waterline, filling in the waterline with a little bit of, I think I used yellow or peach. Used some pink for the scaleras in the corner of the eye, and ooh, let's use some light brown just to start things off. My Mr. Super Clear was working really well this day. I had no problems. Normally I have a lot of problem building up color with my watercolor pencils. I get some results, but after a little bit I get frustrated and I usually switch to gouache. But not today. It was like drawing on paper. It was great. I don't know why it was so great, but I definitely took it as a sign to just maybe stick with watercolor pencils this time. Just this once. I added some highlights to the eyes with the white watercolor pencil, and I'm giving her brown eyes with 2 shades of brown. We whiten up the corners of the eyes a little bit. Wow. You know when you just have one of those really good art days? I think this was my really good art day this day. Oops. One of the bottom eye lines is a little off from the other, so I'm just going to correct that. And then it was time for another coat of Mr. Super Clear. Now I'm going to add a little bit darker blushing to the body because I realized the first blushing was just blending in too much. So let's give it a little bit more, a little darker boost, and we'll see if we can get out some of these details, because this is a really nice sculpted body. And I love how they articulated the top. It's great. It makes me fearful of trying to do a breast augmentation on these dolls, but you know, I like the fact that you can pose a chest. It's really cool. Added a little bit more blushing to the doll and contoured her face a little bit more. And I'm trying to hide where the epoxy sculpt is originally on that skin. It's kind of hard to hide at first. At the end I managed it, I think. Add some blushing to the top of her cheeks, her chin, and I started adding in her eyeshadow. Then I tried to use pastels to add her eyebrows, but I ended up using eyeshadow, black eyeshadow. Once I got the general shape, I used my kneaded eraser to correct the shape a little bit. Then I went back and used my watercolor pencil to add more definition to it later. And I'm alternating between darker and lighter brown pencils, depending on what part of the eye I'm working on. I went ahead and used little stripes of lighter reddish brown pencil to add a little bit of more definition to the bottom of the eyes. just really had fun with this. It was just one of those projects that you just do, and it's just a lot of fun. Now using the my watercolor pencils, I'm going to add in little individual hairs into the eyebrows. And I think they came out really good this time. Took a couple tries though. Alright, I'll admit it took several tries. Then using a white watercolor pencil, I go ahead and add some highlights to the bottom of her eyes. And wow! And I'm going to go ahead and use a little bit of more eyeshadow to kind of blend that in a little bit at the bottom. And then I use some mica powder in Pearl. And added her eyelashes for the bottom. And also for the top. The secret with eyelashes is don't do a straight line. They are curved, so make them look a little curved. Next, I'm going to add the pupils. And oh my gosh, I'm just loving how she's coming out. She really looks like the new Ariel. Let's add some highlights to those eyelashes. Make them really have a little bit more definition. I also added a few more extra black ones in too. Using a darker pencil, I also darkened the outline around the eye. And here we go with another color of brown to add just a little bit more of a flex look to the eye. I think these are some of my best eyes yet with pencils. Let's add some baby hairs in black to blend in with the hairline when the hair is down. In retrospect, I probably should have done a little contouring with light black eyeshadow like I did for the eyebrows, but oh well. And let's add some highlights to the bottom lashes too. And let's darken up those ears a little bit and around them a little bit more to kind of hide where the epoxy was. And sorry for the bad angle here. And I noticed that some of the paint had come up on the ears, so I went ahead and added a little bit more and then blushed it after another spray of Mr. Super Clear. Next, I did use gouache for one thing, and that was to add her eye shines. And then I used a pink pencil to bring out the scleras and give it a little more definition in the corner of the eyes. And I used a little bit of gray to give it a little depth and definition, almost like a little shadow at the top. I'm really happy with that. Let's give her some Liquitex, Shining Liquitex after a final spray of Mr. Super Clear, that is, or two. And shine up those lips and those eyes. Now, the body needs some scales. I was debating on this because of the fact that this fabric has little flecks of glitter on it that color shift a little. But no, she needs scales. So using my fabric Lumiere paints, I go ahead and start adding them. The thing about Lumiere is it does have to be heat set to become permanent on fabric. But luckily, I have a new crafting iron to help with that. And I just take my time, and you notice that it shifts color a lot. So every time it shifts color, I basically just clean off my brush, and I just have all my colors just sitting there. And I just go ahead and keep switching colors every couple minutes sometimes. That's the front done. Time for the back. Wow. A little bit of shading at the top of each scale, and of course the shadow of the scale underneath makes them look real. Now let's add some lines and highlights to the fins and to her ankle fins and fluke. So first I did the darker lines, and then I went back with a pearl white to give it highlights. And on the Fluke, I even used gold in some places for the highlight where it was a little bit lighter, and for the darker areas I used silver. And yeah, for these lines too, I had to switch colors a lot. So I did sometimes I just did a short line and then went back with a darker color for the longer line. After that, we gotta give those edges some love. Oh my gosh! Here's both sides of the Fluke done, and of course I did both sides of all the fins, and while I had my paints out, I gave her rainbow nails. Now it's time to deal with the hair, so it's time to take off the mask, find the part, oops, and this is why I said I should probably have gotten a little closer to the hairline. I went ahead and boil washed the hair and put her aside to dry, and used my little craft iron to heat up the fabric. And you know what? She's a princess, I think. She's not exactly Ariel. I think she's more of Ariel's cousin. So let's make her a crown and then give her a pair of stud pearl earrings. Next, I drew out the shape of her body and created a pattern for her top. Once I had the pattern just right, I took out some fabric, same fabric I used for the tail, just I did add scale detail, and I went ahead and sewed her a top. I added snaps to the back and little gathers in the front. Then I heated up her head with my hairdryer and reattached it. By the way, if you struggle with accessories like I do, and I really do struggle, I suggest checking out Lady Dynamite's store. She has some really cool ones. The last thing this girl needs is a fish friend. So I had bought 2 G3 Lagunas, so I took the fish from the second one, gave it several, like 3 or 4 coats of just plain acrylic white, sprayed it with Mr. Super Clear, and then using my eyeshadow palette, I went ahead and planned out where her colors are going to be. Now, originally I was going to stick with this, but no, I want it to be brighter to match the doll. And some of these colors aren't showing up as well as I thought they would. Oops. And yes, I went ahead and painted the underbelly. Once I had an idea of what colors were going to go where, I went ahead and used my watercolor pencils to begin her face up. I know it's not going to be as long as the other face up took. This one took significantly less time, but then again, it's a fish. I just had fun with it. Another good art day. Using purple to outline the eyes, I went ahead and filled them in with a hot pink pencil, leaving room in for highlights, of course. I also followed in her watercolor line, added some details with the purple, gave her irises, but I think I ended up deciding that she needed to get a sideways look. So then after that, I added a little bit of gray for definition at the top. And let's give her face some markings. She doesn't really have eyelashes because she's a fish. So I'm going to just, instead of eyelashes, I'm going to give her some markings and fill them in with some color. Yeah, I know, they kind of look like delightful style eyelashes, but at the same time, she is a fish, and fish don't have eyelashes. But I just was having fun with this project at this point. I decided to give her some green markings above her eyes and around her face. Kind of like a mask. Not quite a mask, I guess. I just was having fun with it at this point. Let's give her another coat of Mr. Super Clear. Oh, wait, maybe not. Yep. I'm trying to darken up where the edge of the eyeline would be. And we give a little definition to the corner of her eyes. She's looking cute. Let's add the acrylic colors now to brighten her up. After, of course, a coat of super clear. So taking the same paints I used on the doll's tail and on her nails, I went ahead and just gave it a really nice coat of paint and just played with the colors. Then I decided to do the rest of her face up in acrylic too, just to match the brightness and intensity of the rest of her body. But I left her cheeks white. And that was just because it needed just a spot of something else. And here's she is. Let's call her Melody. I'm really proud of how she came out. I think she's a combination of pride as well as just beauty. I hope you enjoyed Melody's creation, and please don't forget to check out Lady DynamiteCreates Etsy store. That's where I got my ears and my ice cream cone. I hope you all have a great, wonderful day and a wonderful summer, and I hope you're enjoying the Mermaid series. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all your support. Bye.